We've got an outstanding guest coming up in the next minute. I have been so looking forward to interviewing this gentleman. Our next guest is Barry Eaton. Barry has a wide international experience in all areas of media and entertainment industries. He's a well-known radio and TV presenter, having spent many years with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and various commercial radio and TV stations. He produces the internet program called RadioOutThere.com, now in its 11th year, enjoying a worldwide audience. His first book, Afterlife, Uncovering the Secrets of Life After Death, moved him forward. Barry is a qualified astrologer, psychic, and medium, and in 2012 he did what he terms a postgraduate course in mediumship at the world-famous Arthur Findlay College in the United Kingdom. Barry originally trained as an actor and has appeared in a number of films, stage productions, and TV shows. As head of the Faculty of Journalism at Macleay College in Sydney, Barry lectured in radio journalism. He also has a wide knowledge of he has a wide corporate experience running his own company. I got to get some new glasses, which embraced media consulting, video, and audio production. He's in demand as a voiceover artist / actor and has narrated a series of wildlife documentaries. Barry's voice is also heard guiding motorists on GPS navigation systems for certain vehicles such as Jaguars and Land Rovers. His new book, called No Goodbyes, is going to address many questions that we all have about the next step in our journey. His website is www.barryeatonnogoodbyes.com. Without any further delay, let's go ahead and get him on the line. Barry, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk and the Fringe Radio Show.
Great, Pat. Lovely to be here. I think this is my first time in Salt Lake City and going to all those other stations you mentioned. Wow, what a wonderful audience you've got.
Well, thank you. We've got a good following, and our station that we're on here in Salt Lake, Barry, is we just celebrated 50 years of being on the air. We're the third oldest talk radio station in the United States of America, so we're very proud of that, and very proud to be a part of United Broadcasting, where we can do shows like this and talk about any kind of subject and just have a great following and a great group of listeners.
Oh, that's fantastic. 50 years. Well, I was part of the very first talkback show here in Australia as well, back in the mid-'60s. So we've got something in common there, Pat. Well done.
Well, I haven't been here that long, but I've been here. I'm in my 6th year of doing this show. My wife and I have been doing this show for 6 years. Sometimes it feels like 60, but we love it. And in talking to people like yourself and this genre, this subject, all these subjects that we cover, from ufology to paranormal research to psychic mediums to the afterlife, so many of these topics for so long, and I would assume you would agree, were so, I don't want to call them taboo, but we're just not accepted. And now people thrive. They have so much interest, and they're looking to gain so much knowledge.
Well, particularly in the States, I've found, Pat. I've been working in radio and TV, as you mentioned, for a long time here in Australia, and we're only just starting to really wake up. There's still a lot of my former colleagues who think I've gone around the bend a little bit, having deviated from sports and news broadcasting and talkback and whatever, to be dealing in metaphysical and paranormal subjects. But we're slowly following along. But I've found, since I've been talking about my latest book, particularly No Goodbyes, the reaction in the United States and Canada has been absolutely wonderful, very, very gratifying. So you guys are way ahead of us all, I think.
Well, I think people here are just starting to accept it, Barry, and I'm sure they are in other parts in the world. I know in the UK it seems like we actually have listeners that listen to us via the internet in the United Kingdom, and in all different places. And people, again, they want this information, and I think people are starting to question some of the core beliefs. I think people in general, have always subscribed to, growing up in families, they've subscribed to what religion is all about and what God is all about and what life and death are all about. And now people are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't quite know. I want to question this a little bit. I'm not, I agree with you and I maybe even believe it, but I think people are starting to wake up and say there's got to be more than this life, what we're experiencing.
Look, I could not agree more. We've all been brought up in fairly strict belief systems, shall we say, even if it's just in our environment in schools and colleges and whatever. But people are questioning now, and I think things like the internet have certainly opened up new avenues of information. But people are being encouraged to look abroad and not be under the control and structure as they have been in previous years. And isn't that so much better to be able to look around and say, well, yes, there's a lot of truth in that, but I really want to find out for myself, take responsibility for myself. And I think that's what it's all about. Certainly with my research into the afterlife, that's one of the prime factors that comes through, taking responsibility, learning, and not giving into things like fear of death, because there's no such thing as death.
Right. Well, let me ask you, before we get started, because I want to talk about, I'd like to get a little bit of your bio. I read your bio. Of course, I just scratched the surface, but I'd like to talk to you about how you got into everything you did in your book. But let me ask you just real quick, because tonight we have a very large audience listening that's into ufology. How is ufology in Australia? How is that looked at, Barry? Do people accept that? What is it like in your country?
Well, certainly more and more people are accepting it. I've just come back from a conference, the Nexus conference, which is on every year, Nexus magazine, which is available in the States, by the way. And we had a lady called Mary Rodball speaking there at the conference, and she's got a very big following. Mary's been a guest on my radio program several times. She's helped people who have been abducted or allegedly abducted, whatever you like to say, and she has presented so much statistical and irrefutable kind of information and credible facts that are coming through. So more and more people are accepting the fact that how arrogant is it to think that we are alone in this universe, that human beings on this planet are the be-all and end-all. That's a frightening thought for a start. And the fact that we are being visited by other beings, shall we say, from other worlds, well, certainly I've had plenty of backup from the world of spirit with the contacts that I've got there saying, yes, of course, there are many other worlds. You're not alone in the universe. And I think, how arrogant is that for us to take that attitude? But the whole area of ufology, I talked to a lot of guests on my own program about disclosure. I've had everybody from Stephen Greer right through to many other people appear on the program. And I'm definitely out there as one of those who not only believe but know for a fact that we are being visited. And in fact, I don't want to start stirring around, but there are people from other worlds living among us. They're not all little green men or
Right.
little greys or whatever. Heavens above, the majority of them are humanoid in appearance.
Right. Exactly. Let's go ahead and talk about you a little bit. How did you've got the books out? How did you get into this, Barry? What spawned your interest to looking into our next step in the journey of life or existence? How did this all how did it all kind of come together for you?
Well, I've always had an interest in these things, Pat. In fact, I was doing talkback radio programs in the 80s, and I had all sorts of guests on the program. And one of them was an astrologer. So when I went through what so many people on the planet seem to be doing these days is a divorce, I suddenly thought, hey, I cannot continue doing exactly what I'm doing now because it's just not working. And it wasn't just the relationship, it was many aspects of life. So I said to this guy, I'm going to do your astrology course next year, Gary. And he said, what? He nearly fell off the chair. And he said, where did that come from? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to do your astrology course. I really feel that's a new direction for me. So I did. I did a diploma in astrology while I was still working, doing all sorts of radio programs and running a PR company and all sorts of things. And after that, my clairvoyant abilities opened up because I had that state of intention. And having a state of intention is just so powerful. It's so necessary in anything that we do, whether it's developing your intention or just trying to sink that putt at the golf course. It doesn't really matter. State of intention is so powerful. After that, I met in 1993 a lady called Judy, and Judy and I sort of just clicked immediately. She looked at me one night, the first or second night, we were sort of in a group situation, and thought to herself, I am going to spend the rest of my life with this man. And she did. But unfortunately, that life was only 4 years, and she passed over very suddenly and very tragically. But after that, we connected through a medium that had been appearing on a radio program I was doing that I'd started with Judy, actually, called Celestial Power. And I was given permission to continue my communications with Judy after connecting with her through a medium called Ruth Phillips. And my medium abilities just opened up and increased with a lot of help from the other side. So that's how it started. That's a little nutshell description there for you, Pat. I can go on forever about all this sort of thing, but I think that's probably enough to give you a clue as to how it all clicked into place for me.
Well, one thing, Barry, I think one thing is as we get older, when we're young, I think we all feel invincible. I think when we're younger, we're afraid of death, especially as our lives, as we start to get into relationships and as our lives come together. I mean, at a younger age, for me, death scared me. I don't know about yourself, but I think it did a lot of people. People love being with families and friends, and if things are, going the right direction. But then as we get older in life and experience different things like you did with Judy, now I don't say that I'm ready to step off the planet tomorrow, but if it happens, I'm at a point in my life where I've learned so much talking to people like you and having so many great guests on. I'm okay with that. If that sounds hopefully not too crazy. Not that I want to, but I'm okay with it. I know there's above and beyond religious beliefs and what we've been taught through our lives. Just what I've learned through the research of doing this program. There's a lot of steps, and I think we're pretty early in the journey.
Yeah, that's for sure. Look, hang in there, Pat. You got a long way to go yet. As I said before, there is no such thing as death in the way that we understand it and have been brought up to understand it. Like, you reach the end of your life, that's it, lights out, good night, nurse, off you go. It just doesn't happen because we are, unlike most belief systems which tell us, yes, you are a body with a soul. No, we're not. We are a soul energy wrapped in a spirit as the traveling vehicle and attaching itself to a human body to have a human experience. We are an everlasting spiritual energy being, and that spirit comes from somewhere. Call it the world of spirit, call it the afterlife, call it the other world, heaven, paradise, whatever. Mm-hmm. They're all labels, doesn't matter. We come from there when the spirit, the soul, detaches itself from the body. Yeah, the body dies, but we don't die. That's the most important thing, Pat. And we, logically, go back to where we came from prior to attaching ourselves to the human body. And so, as I said, the afterlife, the other world, whatever. So that is our real home. Earth is not a home. Earth is a place we're visiting to have a human experience, whether that human experience is a matter of weeks or a matter of a century or even longer. It doesn't really matter because that is what we have chosen and agreed to in our life contract this time around. And this is only one of many, many life experiences that we do have. It's not all just down to one life. It's not a matter of what you do now, that's it, and it's all over when we die. No, we don't die. And I think that is the central message that everybody in spirit that I talk to is wanting us to know. Get the fear out of your system. The acronym for fear, F-E-A-R, is false evidence appearing real.
Uh-huh.
And I've used that
so many times. I like that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. If you think about it, false evidence appearing real. Right. And how often have we given away to fear during our life, afterwards to find out, I have nothing to fear after all. It was all in the mind or my emotions or whatever. This happens time and time and time again. So don't give in to fear. Don't give in to these black thoughts of disappearing forever once we die, because we don't die.
You talk about a life contract, Barry. I know that some people have the gift, and that like yourself, they have psychic abilities. They have intuition. There's some. I think all of us do to some degree, but some people are blessed to have more. Do you understand the life? I mean, the life. When you talk about the life contract, it's something that I would say that in my lifetime, as I'm experiencing this life, I don't know really when it starts and stops. But when I move to that next place, do you think a lot of that becomes very clear? Do you if I want to paraphrase it, is you sit back and say, okay, I understand it. While I was experiencing my life on Earth, I didn't need to know a start and an end date, but now I've moved out of this realm, and yeah, that start and end date was always there to begin with.
Very much so. And as an astrologer, I know that the time, place, and date of birth is all powerful. And I've had this confirmed from my contacts in spirit. I have many contacts in spirit that I work with. And the time of our birth is not random. It's not an accident. It's not, oh, yes, you were late in being delivered or you arrived early. No, you arrived at exactly the moment you were meant to arrive. And the life contract that we agree to in our life between life situation, our life contract is something that is like any other contract. It's a job contract. You've got a contract, I don't know, probably at your radio station, and it might be a 1 year, 2 year, 10 year, an open contract. I don't know, but there are certain conditions in that contract, and that's what we do have. And part of our contract that we agree to before coming back to this life is the longevity and the various points along the way that we have agreed to undertake. But that, getting back to, when we're going to leave the body, that is certainly an agreement between us and the powers that be, shall I say. And that may well be, as I said, 1 year, it might be 1 month, it might, because we're all back here for a purpose. But to break that life contract, that's not very smart. Like breaking any other contract, there's always some kind of repercussion.
What about, well, in breaking the contract, is that suicide?
Well, yes, you could talk about it as suicide, because if you have agreed to, say, live 60 years of age, for instance, and at 40 things are just too bad, you cannot take it any longer. You've made a disgrace of yourself, you've done dreadful things or whatever, and you decide to take your life. You're abrogating your contract. Now, when you get over the other side, we've been told with many belief systems, yes, it's a sin. Well, from what I've been told, no, it's not a sin, but there are going to be certain, as I said, repercussions. You are helped on the other side, helped to understand that you can't just walk away from a situation because it's a bit too hard, or you've upset yourself, or you're in an emotional state. There are certain situations, I guess, when people have huge mental problems and whatever, that situation is slightly different. But if you consciously take your life to be able to escape a situation or situations, then you have to go back, look at all of this, and then in the vast majority of cases, you're sent back again for another life, and you've got to do it all over again because you've come there to face those situations. You've come there to face those problems, and by running away from them, you haven't faced them at all. And because the whole purpose of life is to develop our soul, to grow and develop as souls, then walking away or taking your life and to escape those situations is not helping you develop at all. In fact, it's setting you back a little bit. So you've got to come back and do it again.
Wow. Do you think that that's your decision, Barry, to come back around, or is that made for you?
No, that's made for you. Yeah. Like any situation, and I do use the phrase as above, so below quite a lot in my books because that's what I've been given. Life here on earth, in many cases, is a reflection of life in the world of spirit. And we bring these thoughts back here with us and we create certain conditions about from the afterlife back here. So it's our decision, but we have to make up for it, and that's the most important thing.
Gotcha. Let's talk about your new book. I have not had a chance to look at it, but No Goodbyes. Can we talk about that a little bit? And your first book, of course, was Afterlife. You want to talk about that a little bit and what took you into writing the second book?
Yeah, sure. Afterlife, Uncovering the Secrets of Life After Death, I wrote, and it was published in Australia in 2011 and came out in the States 2 years ago in August 2013. Afterlife was triggered by Judy, actually, because after I mentioned earlier on, we'd had this wonderful relationship, which was so short and so sweet. But when she passed over, I continued to work with her. I started to run some spiritual development groups in the early part of this century, and I kept on getting these messages back. You've got to write a book. You're going to write that book. There's a book out there. You have to write it. And I'd even get reminders from other mediums and people like this. In fact, my good friend Bob Murray, who lives outside of Montreal in Canada, rang me up one day, and he's been on my program several times, to say, "Hey, Barry," said, I got Judy here, and she says, "When are you going to write that book?" So I thought, all right, okay, I can take a hint. I can get nagged from spirit enough. So I set out to write the book, and all sorts of things. As soon as I made that intention, all sorts of things opened up for me. But the basis of that book, Afterlife, Pat, is my own story, which I was encouraged to write through a series of regressions, where I was taken back to the death in my previous life, and then taken through the whole process of what happened from the end of that life through the beginning of this life, as well as many other sort of pieces of information that were there. And I also told the story of Judy and myself, and how we worked together in spirit. But along the way, I was connected with many different guides and other spirits, and it just emerged. So the whole story of Afterlife is partly my own journey through the whole life between life areas, and also the research that I've done from communicating with other spirits, and also some of the other people that I've managed to interview on my own radio program. I've talked to many mediums, and I've talked to all sorts of experts in this area, and I was able to extrapolate and confirm some of the things that they've said with my own experiences. So it's a combination. But the whole premise of the book is to help people to understand that there is no need to fear death, because death as such really doesn't exist, as I've said a couple of times already. And once we get through that, then we can live a wonderful, long, healthy life without any worries. And the lovely thing, Pat, is that since I wrote Afterlife, I had so many people contact me, because it's been published in several European languages as well. So many people contact me from around the world to say, "Thank you, it's helped us with our grief. It's helped us understand that we haven't lost our family members, that we will connect once again. It's helped us to realize there's no such thing as death." But also, importantly, it's helped us to look at the life we're leading now and to make some changes, to make sure that we do develop our soul and to think about life and not just get caught up in the mad stress of the 21st century. And that was so gratifying, I've got to tell you.
Right, right. Well, we do. I think we get hung up with day-to-day life and problems that are so insignificant in the scheme of things. They consume so much of our energy.
Oh, they do. They do. But I mean, that's part of life in the 21st century.
Right.
It's always been that way.
Right.
But I do believe, along with a lot of other people, that this has been going on for thousands of years, that back in Roman times, they gave the plebs bread and circuses to keep them amused, while the upper echelon, shall we say, got on with running the country and the empire. Nowadays, those same world leaders, world powers, whatever, give us sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Expand that out to sex in all sorts of areas of, pornography and wild TVs and movies and things like that. Drugs we know all about, and rock and roll is the music. It's the everything from sport right through, but also keep us tied down with mortgages and stress and worries and everything like that. Give us those little bits on the side so we don't have to think. And people have got caught up in this morass. But now, fortunately, as you said earlier, we are starting to think for ourselves and not be controlled. Because I do believe, and they certainly reflect this on the other side, that we are being controlled, and we need to take responsibility for ourselves, our actions, our thoughts, and live our lives, not the lives that other people want us to live.
Right, right. And in some cases, under somebody else's thumb, for power, power and greed. Let me ask you, when I'd like to get your thoughts on and this is kind of well, interesting subject, maybe touchy subject, but as far as when a person passes over to the other side, let's say they've been a bad person here on Earth, doing bad things. Do you feel
there's one or two of them around?
Right? Do you feel that there is a heaven or hell type scenario, or all is forgiven, or what's your take on that?
Well, you'll be pleased to know for a start, Pat, I'm not reflecting on your behaviour or anything like that, but you'll be pleased to know there is no such place as hell. There's nobody with horns on his head and a pitchfork sticking it into nasty regions, punishing you forever, all of that stuff, very Dante-esque sort of thing. But when we do pass over to the other side, everybody does go to the same place, generically, but there are many, many, many different levels in the afterlife. And the level that we go to reflects what we have been doing in our previous life, also the level to which our soul has evolved. So if you are one of these nasty people, whether you happen to be a terrorist, a mass murderer, a rapist, a paedophile, a drug baron, a dictator, whatever, then you're not exactly going to be welcomed with open arms on the other side and say, well, you made one or two mistakes, but never mind, you were only human, so here you are, come in, welcome, enjoy yourself. No, you are going to end up in a place where you're not going to be punished, but you're going to be helped to understand what you've done, helped to actually experience the hurt that you have given people, and that hurt in the imprint of your own soul. But it's done in a very positive sort of a way, so that people can understand just exactly what they've done and the ramifications of what they have done. And then eventually, once they have been able to be, I won't say processed, but certainly gone through all of this, then they are able to be given second chances, third chances, whatever, to come back again to lead other lives, to repay the karma, to balance the karma in that life. Now, obviously, we all make mistakes.
Sure.
Nobody's perfect. And if we learn from those mistakes, which is the purpose of a mistake, that's fine. But we all do good things and we all do bad things. But it depends exactly where we are on the scale as to where we go back to. When we do go back to the afterlife, we're not sort of issued with a harp and a cloud and said, off you go, there you go, bye, enjoy yourself. No. We, first of all, have to go back again into this vast afterlife world of spirit. And the majority of us have to have some kind of healing process because we've usually passed from some kind of health condition, whether it be an accident, whether it be a long illness or whatever. So when we go back, the spirit has the imprint of the physical, and that has to be helped and healed. And once we get through that healing center, which there's no such thing as time in the afterlife, it's another dimension of reality, but once we do get this state of healing, which can take any number of months or even years of earth time, we're then able to reconnect and move out to do what's called a life review. Now, we all work with guides and we all have various spirit helpers. And as I've written about in Afterlife, there is a council of elders, a vast number of elders all over the place. But we've been working with them in various lifetimes, and they were the ones that helped us choose the life that we're in now. When we go back, I usually equate this to making, at the end of a game of football or hockey or basketball or whatever, what happens? The team gets in there, the coach comes in, we all have our say, what do we do? Did we play our game? Did we stick to the game plan? Whatever. So what can we do for the next game? It's similar to that, as above, so below. When we get back, the elders talk to us, give us replays, and they are available, these replays, let me tell you, holistically too. And we understand, same as the people who've gone over there with the nasty side of things, we get to experience maybe some of the hurt that we've doled out to people, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's hurt emotionally or whatever, and we get to experience this so that we can learn what we've done. And we are then looking back at the purpose, because the purpose which has been buried in our subconscious in the lifetime, that purpose is suddenly clear to us. And, oh boy, yes, I was going to go back and I was going to do that, wasn't I? Whatever happened?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you made mistakes. You're treated lovingly. There's no punishment. There's no nasty people up there with thunderbolts and great big booming voices that are punishing you. It's all done in a very loving and a very supportive way. And then when you get back and you connect with your soul family, because we've all got soul families, immediate soul families and extended soul families, we then go back into the life between life situation. And this involves a lot of various activities, from once again working with groups to further work on the mistakes we've made to eventually preparing for our next life. But in between time, there's all sorts of recreation things that we do have up there, because it is an R&R time, rest and recreation, and we do have many, many things that are available to us in the afterlife. So that's a quick summation. There's so much more that goes on, as I've written about in Afterlife and, of course, in No Goodbyes. It's just a vast, vast world, and we are part of it. But we are part of it as we are on Earth, according to our socio-economic standards, shall we say. If you've done a lot of preparation, you've got a good education, you've got a good job, obviously you're going to live in maybe a different house to somebody who's opted out and never really educated themselves and got a fairly basic job. You know, that's it. And our circumstances are reflective of exactly where we are on the evolution scale.
Right, right.
Does that all make sense?
It does. It's a lot to gather. It's a lot to grasp. But yes, it does.
Well,
make
that takes care of about a lot of chapters in Afterlife and No Goodbyes. Let me tell you.
I can imagine.
There's a lot more.
There's
a lot more to read about.
I've got to read. I need to read the book. I need to go through it in detail, because I do find this subject so interesting and intriguing, and I think most people do. They want to know more. One of our listeners got some questions for you, Barry. One of our listeners wrote in and said, "What about ghosts? What about people that?" Of course, we talk with a lot of paranormal researchers. What about these people that get trapped? And you always hear the term, we need to help them go to the light. How do you think those souls, those individuals, those spirits, are they hung up somewhere?
Well, that's a good question, and there are many different stories. Everybody has got a different story when they leave the body, just the same as everybody has their own unique lifestyle here on Earth. We're all the star of our own movie. But when we do leave the body, some of us, because of guilt or whatever, choose not to cross over. We're all met and we're all helped once we leave the body, but some do not wish to recognize this, and they want to stay on. Now, I've personally been involved in a couple of clearings, shall we say. I've written about that in detail in Afterlife, about one of the clearings that I was involved in. Very dramatic. But there are many situations here where some people don't even realize that they've left the body, and they're hanging around in the house that they lived in, and not even realizing that their body has disappeared, because they just see everything. They see all these strange people in their house. So what are they going to do? Get out of my house. Nobody's listening to them. They cannot get through to them. So what do? They bang things together. They get enough energy and enough anger and enough emotion to be able to knock a plate off a shelf or a pot off out of a drawer or whatever. And people are thinking, oh my God, what's going on here? What's going on here? And then there are the other side of a situation where you say, we see ghosts. Now, when we move back into the afterlife, it it vibrates, I should say, at a much higher rate, because it is another dimension. The afterlife vibrates much, much, much higher than the earth plane. And the more you advance in the afterlife, the more your vibrations increase. So when people do come back again, maybe to visit their friends and relatives, they are able sometimes to be able to lower the vibrations enough so that they can appear. Sometimes those people who still haven't crossed over have got a fairly low vibrational area, so they are able to appear as ghosts. Not everybody, though, that is there is a ghost, because quite often it's an energy imprint. And there are certain things, where we hear the story about the European castles where at midnight the ghost walks with his head tucked underneath his arm. I think the old song goes. That is an energy imprint. It just replays every day at the same time. It's a very complex question to answer, and every case is different. But yes, we are visited by many people from the afterlife. Yes, they are around us. Some are able to be seen. Other people have stayed behind. They're stuck. And we do, and we can help them to move on. We can help them to be rescued, I think, because there's always plenty of spirit people out there who are just waiting to be able to help people to cross over. As I said, I've written about it at length in Afterlife.
Very, very interesting. Where can our listeners, let's throw that out, where can our listeners get your books at, Barry?
Oh, look, all good books there's. Probably a few crook ones as well. But no. Both books, Afterlife and No Goodbyes, are available in various bookstores. They're also available, of course, through online, through Amazon, through Barnes & Noble, through... I always use a lot of Fish Pond when I'm ordering books, which is a great source. But there are many different sources. If you just Google either Barry Eaton Afterlife or Barry Eaton No Goodbyes, then you can find out exactly also where they can be purchased from. But they're available all over the place, really.
So people can just on Amazon.com or even your website. And again, Barry's website, if people want to take a look at it, it's BarryEatonNoGoodbyes.com. Go check it out. I was looking through the talking points that I was sent, and question number 6, other new topics that you write about in No Goodbyes. And the subjects include, about soul creation, spirit creation, and some of the controversial subjects, of euthanasia, prison reform, some of these things. Why did you touch upon that? Why did you feel that, or what drove you to touch upon those subjects?
Good question. It wasn't my decision. In brief, I've connected through a trance medium friend of mine, a trance medium is somebody who is able to be taken down into a very deep state, and then another spirit comes through alongside of them and actually communicates. And I worked with a couple of ordinary mediums, conscious mediums, and they've tuned in to many situations. I've got a lot of their information. But essentially, working through Kelly, John Dingwall, who was a former Australian journalist, movie writer and producer, has been over in spirit now for about 10 or 11 years. And John came through. I knew John very briefly on Earth before he passed, but he came through and identified himself as basically, I call him my spoke spirit. And John represents something like about 95 to 100 different spirit energies at various levels in the afterlife. And he equates it to a kind of newsreader status, where people are talking through him and the information is pouring out. It's not necessarily just him that is bringing this information. It's coming from various sources, and a lot of these subjects were actually brought up by these spirits because they want us to know this information. There was a concerted drive in the spirit world to, first of all, remove the fear of death and also unveil some of the mysteries that have been dogging people for quite a few years. And also, they want us to understand that there are lots of things going on in life that are just not helping our soul growth. They want to make comments. They want to let us know the mistakes we're making and give us the opportunity to rectify them ourselves. And this is where some of these topics that you mentioned there before. And they were the ones that raised these, and I sort of was quite amazed at times. Wow, For instance, a very sensitive topic, shall we say, of euthanasia came through, and we're talking about various kinds of illness, along with mental illness and things like that. And they really wanted to address these. But with euthanasia, we've got a guy here in Australia who's really trying to push the whole euthanasia area. And a lot of headlines, a lot of negative headlines. And a lot of people say, well, hang on, if your cat or your dog or your horse or any other animal is in pain, what do? You put it down. But we're not cats or dogs or horses. We're a different vibration, and we are human beings. And as I said, the purpose of being here as a human being is to grow in soul energy. And I was told that euthanasia is not only frowned upon, it is really, really discouraged from the world of spirit. And I said, well, okay, well, why is that? Because, if somebody's in dreadful pain, wouldn't you feel the most decent thing to do would be to let them just die or help them to die? And they said, well, no, if it's a matter of being on life support, yes, by all means, turn off the life support if it's that stage. Let nature, let God take its course. Let the divine energy there work through. But if you turn around and help that person, it is tantamount to suicide. You're breaking their life contract. And I could understand that, but then the clincher came in, Pat, because sometimes, and more than sometimes, a person will learn the greatest lessons they need to in this life in the last few months or even years of their life. And they might be going through all sorts of problems. They might be going through all sorts of pain. But the lessons they're learning for their soul growth are so important that to interrupt this is not good for their development. And
Right.
it suddenly clicked in with me, yes, it's part of the life contract. You abrogate that contract, what are you doing? And you do it on behalf of somebody else, you are abrogating their contract. You're not helping them. And sometimes we do have to suffer. Sometimes we really, and it's hard to reconcile that when you see somebody suffering. It really is. But that's the explanation I got from the other side. And the more I thought about it, the more I could understand their position.
Not another human's decision to take someone's life.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
As I said, turning off life support or just allowing somebody to fade away naturally, that's fine. But to actively use drugs or help them or whatever physically, it's verboten on the other side.
Right. No, I would agree with that. I truly would, especially making a decision for somebody. Although it seems in today's times, Barry, that's happening a little more often than we realize. I know in the United States here, the state of Oregon has a lot. I believe it's Oregon, maybe it's Washington, has rules that will actually allow that to happen to some degree.
Yeah, well, I think this is why they're speaking out on the other side, to make sure that these thoughts, these principles are spread, because I'm not the only one that's mentioning this sort of thing, but because there's a lot of us that have been contacted by spirits who want this information to get out. But we can't just allow this whole thing. You think about it. If it spreads, what are the ongoing ramifications of something like this? Oh, well, yes, we're having a bit of a problem here, feeding everybody. Well, yes, reach a certain stage, let's knock them all over. That's a potential scenario. I'm not saying it would happen, but it's a potential scenario. And in certain countries in the world, that could well end up being the case.
Right.
So we've got to think about these things. And it's not just for the instant convenience of one or two people,
Right.
or one or two counties or states even.
No, that's very true, and you make that's a very powerful statement, but a very true statement. And I believe there are people on this planet that believe that. Like you said, it's one thing to euthanize an animal that's sick. If it goes to the next step where we're making choices about euthanizing human beings, just like you said, powerful statement. Somebody says, you know what, we can't, if this country has whatever, some small country has 500,000 people, there's only enough food to feed, half of that. So let's exterminate the other half. That could
Exactly.
that could get very out of control very fast.
Yeah, very true. And we know there are certain people in the world that would use something
Yes.
like that.
There's some that in the past that would have, if they could have,
For sure. Yeah.
you know.
But this is only one of the topics that many areas that they expressed concern. They expressed concern about prisons, the number of people in prisons, and we're not reforming them, and we're not doing anything. We need to do something to be able to look at the whole prison situation. And the point was given to me that in India, for instance, they encourage people over there to meditate, so that we don't have all of these very disturbed people, and there's more kind of help being given in Indian prisons so that people are not becoming recidivists. And also, the other thing about negative energy that I wanted to get across, that negative energy is so powerful, and some of the darkest energy forces are to be found in prisons and also in mental health areas. And even light workers who are trying to get in to help, and the positive side of the spirit world trying to help in these areas, they have not got a hope in getting through, because these dark energies that rule in prisons and in certain mental institutions are controlling the whole situation there. So they are growing exponentially in their own power. And the power of negativity is very strong, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. Barry, the hour went way too quick, but I want to thank you for well, first of all, for getting up and being here with us. I have come across your radio show out there, radiooutthere.com, and you touch all the subjects that we touch here. I have to pay more attention to it. I was looking through some articles earlier that you had, and I want our listeners to grab your book. I find this, again, a fascinating subject. So many people do. You've taken it to a different level, and I think this book could help a lot of people out. It could put a lot of it could give comfort to a lot of people.
Well, that's the prime purpose of these books, Pat. Afterlife, to start off with, to help with the grief and the understanding that life doesn't end. It just continues in a different form. And then No Goodbyes, helping people to understand the communication that we have with people in spirit, our loved ones, what happens to us, and how we can improve our life, and on a many different levels, because No Goodbyes goes far deeper. Afterlife was a wonderful book, and it's my publishers tell me it's become a bestseller now, which is very gratifying. But No Goodbyes goes into things much deeper. I even go back and do Life Between Lives and some of my own past lives, because my guides told me, yep, you've got to get in there and do your own past lives and talk about that in the book as well, which I've done. So it goes into many deep areas, and I'm absolutely proud to be able to have put my name on these books, and proud to know that I'm working with such wonderful and helpful people in the world of spirit.
You've got a lot of good people out there helping you.
I certainly have.
You do.
And
Barry,
I thank them every day.
I want to thank you again so much for coming on. I'm going to read both books in detail, and I'd love to. I know it's a little early for you. Is it early in the morning there?
No, Pat. It is now 4 minutes to 2 on Sunday afternoon.
Oh, okay. I'm just glad you weren't up at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. So that's not too bad. But I would love.
I'm glad I wasn't up at 3 o'clock in the morning too.
I would love to take another. I would like to spend some time with these books and get you back on again and talk more about it. Because again, I find this so fascinating, and I want our listeners to get the book again. Barry Eaton, No Goodbyes is the name of the book, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's out there everywhere. Pick it up, give it a read, and again, thank you for all the work and dedication you've put into it, Barry, to put a book like this together, and all your research. And I'm going to start to dig into your radio program too. It's a great way to find guests, I'll be honest with you. And it's a great way to learn about things, and again, this whole genre is so unique, and there's people like yourselves who've been doing it for so long. We can learn so much from you.
Well, thank you, Pat. I really appreciate your time too, and also for the chance to actually talk to all of your listeners. And if any of your guests come on there and like to come onto my program as well, we could share guests, Pat. This is what it's all about. Isn't
Maybe
it?
I could even maybe I could even come on.
Sure, what a good idea.
I could talk about all kinds of stuff. I've been doing it too long.
I'll bet you could.
Barry, have a great rest of your weekend. Again, thank you so much. Take care. God bless. And again, it was an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Pat. All the best.
All right, take care. Good night.